Well, welcome to part 2 of Tuesday night Q&A featuring
Mm-hmm.
E-Train and Fumble Fingers. Glad to be with y'all. Sorry for the confusion. Actually, probably was my fault. So I was off doing something. Ellen told me to go live, and by the time I clicked back onto it, she had decided to already go live, so I ended up killing it. So humble apologies.
You weren't off. You were sitting right there, and I was just like, "Okay, we're going live.
Yes,
We're
but
going live. I'm hitting it."
I was on another screen and did not see you take it live. And I'm usually the one that does it. So once Ellen finally gets back. But anyway, welcome. Good to see y'all. Sorry for the rough start. Hello, Melissa. Hello, Jane. Hello again, Jane. And Melissa, we're hoping that Green Bean is his usual fine and spunky self.
Of course.
I assume Ellen, the crew with you, is all doing well. Chunk, Toulouse, Mahoney.
All 15 of them, yes.
How's Calliope?
So she's good. No, but so my roommate's daughter is bringing her dog down in end of June, beginning of July, somewhere in that time period. And so she sent a picture of her dog, Novi, which is a little dog, no big deal. We're keeping her during that period of time when she goes to Spain. And it was with a Labrador puppy, a picture. And I was like, okay, so we're not doing another dog, are we? Because I can't do 5 dogs and 2 cats. That's just not going to be a thing.
Yeah, you can.
No. Oh, with the lab puppy? Are you kidding me? I was like, no way. Nope. Can't do it. I had like a mini heart attack.
Is the lab puppy coming?
No, thank God. I mean, it's enough to have a pit bull mix puppy, and then my 2 dogs, and then to have Novi, which is just 4. And I'm like, another puppy? I can't do it. I can't.
Wouldn't even notice it. Blend right in.
I'd lose my mind. Chasing the cats, doing the can't do it. So,
how long is she going to be in Spain?
Hang on one second, I'll tell you.
This is a little longer than 1 second.
A month.
Okay. It'll go by fast.
Mm-hmm.
You'll
I have no
enjoy
doubt.
the company.
Mm-hmm. All those things.
Yeah, you like all those things. So more power to you. Here's to you.
Oh, I did go to the hardware store today to pick up some washers that I needed to fix something. And they had 5 baby chickens, little chicks. And I wanted to bring one home, but the guy in front of me bought all 5 of them.
What would you do with a baby chick?
I would love it, and I would kiss it, and I would squeeze it, and I would call it George.
You have no coop or anywhere to put it.
No that's the other thing. And so I asked the guy at the store, the hardware store, I was like, do you usually have chickens? He was like, typically, yes, all the time, and all different kinds. He was like, but it's been a little tough to get them this year. I was like, oh, I guess because the bird flu.
Yeah. Egg shortage, whatever. That's funny.
Whatever.
That is
So
funny. Yeah,
these were red something. They were egg chickens. But these were from a local, I guess, breeder or chicken person. I don't know.
well, do you want to have chickens?
Yeah, I want all the things.
And just not 5 dogs.
No, not 5 dogs. 3 is plenty.
Well, you need to get to work building that chicken coop.
I know. I'm working on it. Getting there. I've got lots of the materials. I just got to get it all worked out.
Okay.
I mean, I built a 12 by 12 deck. Come on. I can do a chicken coop.
Yeah, coop's a little different, but yeah. It's, it's kind of like a deck with walls and windows and doors.
Yeah.
So
I can buy a lot of it pre-made. So I'm
and a
good with
roof.
that. Yes, it needs a roof. But we're in the summer, so it's not like it has to be like all warm and stuff.
No, but it doesn't get that cold down there. Chickens should be able to tolerate your winter without a whole lot of additional heat provision.
Yes. I just need
So,
little bins
yeah.
for the chickens to have their eggs.
Yep.
And I need yeah.
In the
I
South,
don't need a
not a biggie.
rooster, right?
Roosters will sacrifice themselves to protect your chickens, and they kind
Right.
of keep the chickens in order. Sometimes the females will fight amongst themselves. A good rooster will break that up, and he finds feed for the females and notifies them. He'll find feed and he'll holler at them. Make sure they eat before he does.
Now, the only issue I have is I don't want to end up getting an egg that has a chick in it.
Now that won't be a problem if you collect them every day.
Okay.
For
Because that
the
would
egg,
really upset me.
yeah, for the egg to develop, it's got to be at least 3 or 4 days at 89 degrees or above, 100 degrees really to hatch and develop normally. So if you collect the eggs every day, they'll never start developing, even if they are fertilized.
Got it.
So
good to know.
Hello, Carson. How the hell are you, man?
Carson
Why did I
freaking
crash the
Pratt.
stream? Just so you would come and ask me that question, because this is Tuesday night Q&A. So good to see you. Yeah, you want to start smooth, you can always go rough once you get into it a bit.
In true Carson fashion.
We are known for that.
Carson. Exactly. He just went straight in. He just, went
Just
for it.
with no protection.
None. No raincoat, no nothing.
Yeah. And that's why we enjoy Carson.
Mm-hmm.
Carson, hope you're doing well. Haven't seen you in a little while. Hope everything is all right in the lovely north up there. Hopefully getting a little warmer. But good to see you.
It was a balmy 78 degrees here today. I'm not sure what it was where you are, Clay.
Yeah, probably about the same.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't checked the weather high, but it was pretty. It warmed up a little bit, starting to get a little rainier. Look like rain's blowing in. I don't know if we'll actually get rain or not, but getting a little cloudier, a little darker. So anyway, Tuesday night Q&A. This is kind of your night. You ask questions. Some people have already sent some in. Got a few lined up. But there's no real formal discussion. Was, thinking or had alluded to I might do something on China and what's going on with China and tariffs and Japan. We'll talk about that a little bit, but Probably save that for Saturday. But got some of the questions we got. The first one starts off, Mr. Marx and Milton Friedman, who didn't agree on much, would have agreed that the middle class was a group of people who owned something, whether it be a property, business, something of value. We have that. We have middle income people who may not own something. To further obscure the definition problem, I recall a poll not all that many years ago when something like 85% of Americans self-describe themselves as middle class. Can you share with us a sensible definition? So define the middle class.
Beats the hell out of me.
Meanwhile, Carson and Melissa are getting a thing going.
Let that go. I will let you know if it's something you need to be nosy about. Go away.
That's all right. I like young love. That's cool. The middle class. So how would I define middle class? There's a kind of a traditional definition or understanding. It embodies not only income but lifestyle to me, but mainly one of stability. Traditionally, the middle class would have access to home ownership, health care, education, and some discretionary income for like savings or a little leisure. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, used to when the middle class went on vacation, they would, go to the beach for a couple of days. Or like when I was little, we used to go to a place called Callaway Gardens. I don't even know if it still exists, but it was like a glorified camping area, and they had lots of stuff for kids. They had like a day school for kids, and I don't know, I was 5 or 6, and I'd be climbing a rope to the top of the gym. They taught us rope climbing and canoeing and different stuff like that, outdoorsy kind of stuff. It was kind of cool. You can also kind of define middle class historically, sociologically. It was in a stable community. Everybody knew each other and kind of looked out for each other. Everybody had the same job for a decade or 20 years. Everybody always hoped for something better. So,
okay, Carson, so that very
go ahead.
That very last comment that you made, hoping upward for something mobility. Better.
Yeah,
I think that's. I'm not middle class. That's the only one that I fit into.
Well, that's historical, and it was pretty much the entire picture if you were middle class. So if I looked at it, more today, I guess starting off with the income, historically, you would take the median income, the median, which is the middle between the high and the low. It's not the average.
Correct.
But it's the medium.
You take out the outliers.
No, you leave the outliers in. But
they don't weigh as heavy.
The high and the low. You can take them out, but normally you just take the full range and which one is at the 50th percentile. You don't add them all together and then take an average.
Correct.
You just find the one that numerically is in the middle. So take the median income, which in the U.S. is about $81,000, $82,000 a year.
Wait, you say median, is that the same as mean?
No. Mean is the average.
Is it?
All right. If I have like, people, 150 different people.
Right.
And the income rate, goes from 1 to 150.
Right.
But let's say the first 50 people all have an average of $1 income.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the mean is going to be somewhere probably around 45 or 50.
What's the difference between median and mean?
Median is the halfway point between 1 and 150, which is the 75th person.
And the mean is you take out the outliers.
No, you don't take out the outliers in either one.
So what's mean?
Mean is the average.
No.
Yes.
I'm looking it up.
Okay. All right. While Ellen's looking it up, we're taking the mean, which is the
You said the median.
taking the median, which is the number in the middle. And then looking at that number, you take 2/3 of that number or 150% of that number. And that gives you kind of that middle class income. So based on a median of 82,000, I get somewhere around $54,000 to $162,000. So that would be kind of the range for middle class. They would generally own their own home or live in an apartment in a, decent to good neighborhood.
Fuck, you're right.
Now, the
mean and average are the same.
Yes, that's what I was saying.
I know. I just said you're right.
Okay. It's not like I don't do statistics for a living.
I know, but I thought mean and median were close to the same and not mean and average.
Yeah, if only I was paid to be good at statistics and econometrics.
Hey, Moffat.
Yeah, I get you. Now, historically, if we look like, the middle class pre-2000, the middle class family was typified by a single income earner.
Did you say typified?
Huh?
Did you say typified?
Yes.
What does that mean? For those of us who...
Typical example.
Okay.
Single income earner who could support a family at a, modest but comfortable level. They owned a home. Now, home ownership back then was much more affordable. The average home price was 2 to 3 times average income. Nowadays, it's 5 to 10 times. So homes were much more affordable, and we'll talk about that affordability in a minute. College was far more affordable. You could work part-time and probably pay your way through college. Access or cost of healthcare wasn't a concern, wasn't an issue. In the prior to the 70s, doctors made house calls. They would come if you were sick, they would come to your house. And they would often, for lower income people, they would take a pie or have their lawn mowed in, exchange for services. Everybody paid something, but if they didn't have money, bake him a pie or go mow his grass, something like that. Money, the middle class back then didn't spend money on conveniences or designer clothes or security systems. Can you imagine not having to have a security system? Now, I know some of our audience lives in a more rural area and probably still doesn't have a security system, but I think most everybody in an urban area or modest community area, a lot of people increasingly do. Carson, young love, dude, I feel so old. Young means that the love is just starting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can enjoy it like a kid before experience just slaps you down.
Again, Carson, they are trying to start rumors. I didn't say a word. That would be that one.
And I don't think they are trying. I think they were pretty successful at it, actually.
But stop it.
Anyway, so, to me, the big difference kind of boils down to, in terms of defining it now. Historically, middle class meant you were doing well. You had security at home, at work, your future. The family was the most important thing to you. Community was second. You knew everybody else's kids. You knew where your kid was. If they were, out in the evening, you didn't worry. Today, I just get a sense that the middle class feels much more precarious. There's anxiety about falling into poverty, how to pay bills, having to work multiple jobs, worrying about paying for medical care, unsafe neighborhoods. The middle class today has more stuff than the middle class did 50 or 75 years ago. But to me, the peace and contentment are much harder to find. Everything is more complicated. People are more complicated. We have a larger upper middle class than we ever had, but the what I would define as the middle class is struggling, and the lower class is almost hopeless and oftentimes angry, particularly in the bigger cities. And that's the big difference to me is, if I talk about the middle class 50 or 75 years ago, I'm looking at that stability. I'm looking at that community. I'm looking at that happy family vibe. Nowadays, if I talk about the middle class, I see people who are more struggling. They may be generally happy. They may be good people, but they don't have that tie to the community. And they're more concerned about their, paying their bills, buying a house, sending your kid to college on one income in the middle class is now impossible. So, but to me, the big thing is that basically the middle class 75 years ago was, stable and hopeful. The middle class today, I see, really is struggling. So I don't know but that's the big difference to me. I don't know if that gives you a satisfactory answer or not, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. I can't quantify it just by income. Income 50 to 150,000, 160,000. But to me, that's only a part of the picture. Carson, not sure how things are going here. Our country might be getting run by a carny soon because people haven't learned to pay attention to last names from Bernie Madoff. Well, I see the other guy, Poilievre. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It seems like in some of the betting polls, he's starting to gain momentum, which is a good sign if you're not a Carney fan. right now the polls are still heavily favoring Carney. But I've seen also some talk about Alberta, if Carney is elected, possibly trying to declare independence. There's a movement going on to gather 600,000 signatures, and they feel modestly confident that they can do it. And then if they, because a big part of their issue is that they send 12 billion Canadian to Ottawa, which is then spent on Newfoundland, Ottawa, wherever. And it doesn't really benefit Alberta. And obviously, politically, they are, of a far different cut than the ruling party, particularly Carney. So if they succeed, I saw some people speculating that Saskatchewan may not be that far behind. I don't know. I am not intimately familiar with Canada or Canadian politics, obviously. I do try to, follow it a little bit. It is of great interest, but there's a lot at stake in Canada with this election. Well, E-Train is gone. Just noticed that. Don't know where she is, but hopefully she'll be back on sometime soon. That damn internet with them. Hopefully they get that fixed in another couple weeks. But until then, we'll just have to be patient with her. Second question was, should I diversify my portfolio now? Now, if you've been watching the show for a little while, you probably are, know that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of diversification. I do agree that in some regards, diversification can reduce your risk. But when you talk about reducing your risk, you're talking about reducing your returns as well. You may make your returns more consistent and lower risk, but it's a tough question to answer for everyone. I've long been a fan, and it's no secret, of Druckenmiller, Peter Lynch, Warren Buffett, all of whom generally oppose broad diversification, viewing it as more of a hindrance to exceptional returns. Now, Druckenmiller in particular is probably the most aggressive of the three. He believes that, superior long-term performance comes from concentrated, high conviction bets. You find a company that you believe in, or a couple of companies that you believe in, and back them wholeheartedly. His argument is that diversification dilutes your returns. And I hate to say this, but he calls it a confession of ignorance. That shows you how strongly he is against diversification. Now, you look at other investors like Buffett, Carl Icahn, George Soros. They built their wealth through very, very focused, narrow investments. Druckenmiller, Soros, our Treasury Secretary, all became billionaires because of one trade, shorting the British pound. Druckenmiller oftentimes talks about how Soros encouraged him to bet 200% of his fund, not 100%, 200%. So you bet 100% of everything you've got, and you go out and borrow an equal amount and wager it too. Well, he did on that single trade, shorting the British pound, and it was the trade of the century. So he emphasizes that rare opportunities, if you see something that you believe is truly an unusual value, you ought to take a position in it. He suggests clearly that most investors over diversify, spread their capital out, too thinly, and he advocates for being a pig. Now, Buffett is not far different. Buffett has said diversification is protection against ignorance, which is a little bit more tactful than the way Druckenmiller phrases it. Buffett says it makes little sense to diversify if you know what you're doing. And that's a big catch. Now, he thinks that, for knowledgeable investors, concentrating investments in a few, well understood investments is far more advantageous, maximizes your returns. He argues that owning too many stocks dilutes your return and your potential gains. He once said, if you can identify 6 wonderful investments, 6 wonderful businesses, that's all the diversification you need. And his Berkshire portfolio has always reflected this. He has significant holdings in a few companies. In 2023, he held up to 50% of Apple. That's a big chunk. Now, he has, over the past year, he started dumping Apple. He saw something. He saw that the sun was fading. The sun was setting. And he wasn't wrong. Now, Buffett has a little bit different advice for average investors who lack the time or experience or deep analysis ability to really analyze companies. He recommends that they diversify broadly, recommending something like a S&P 500 index funds. And he has once said that that's, probably preferable for 98% of people. So Buffett looks at diversification as a safety net, as it were, for those without specific knowledge or specialized knowledge in the field. Druckenmiller doesn't really comment, or has, that I have seen anywhere, he hasn't really stated his views on the average investor. He just talks about his investment views and focus. Druckenmiller is also much more short-term oriented. He looks at bets on rare opportunities across any asset class. Anywhere he can find an unusual but favorable situation, he will wager large on it. Buffett, on the other hand, focuses more on long-term ownership of a few high-quality businesses. He prioritizes stability in terms of the company and competitive advantage. They can do something that their competitors can't. That's the kind of company he loves. One big key to being a good investor is picking good markets. Picking a good investment isn't really that hard. If the market's going up, they're all going up. And if your investment's going up, most people are pretty happy. Now, the average investor doesn't compare his investment to what he could have had. If he sees it going up, he's happy. But the big problem is in picking out your own investments. The big key, the difficult part, is in knowing when to sell. And most average investors, their problem is that they give very little thought to that. They think, once it goes up, it'll always go up. They never look to see if that investment is getting overvalued or if there are better opportunities, such as Buffett did with Apple. He held Apple for years, and it grew and it grew and it grew. Very good investment for him. But there comes a time when when past is not prologue. The future doesn't look the same, and Buffett keeps an eye out for that. And that's why he started reducing his position in Apple. It took him 6 months, He didn't just go out and dump it all because he doesn't want to cave the price. But that's the big weakness with most individual investors that try to manage their own investments or funds, in that they don't really consider what's a good time to sell. So what is a good time to sell? Well, first and foremost, you have to always understand there is never there's never a gain that's a bad thing. Secondly, you have to accept that you will never sell anything at its high. You'll never buy anything at its low. If you do, it's just luck. So if you make an investment and it jumps up significantly in a short period of time, there's like a 99% chance it's going to fall. Anything that moves rapidly and quickly generally is going to be overbought. You've got a lot of people jumping on the train. And so if you own an asset that jumps in price, like what was the GameStop? People were buying it at 10 or 15. It went up to $400. Within a day or two, it was back to 25. Imagine if you'd bought it at 50 and you were able to sell it at 100, 150. Would you be happy? Yeah, you'd be damn happy. That would have been a great investment. So never fear taking a gain. And you don't even have to sell all of your shares. Sell your basic investment plus a little to ensure that you made a gain. Hold the rest. It goes up some more, sell some of it. It starts going down, sell it. You've made a good gain. So for those who really have no interest or insight in investing, who don't want to or don't have the time to spend watching it, Buffett's advice is sound. Probably buying something like an S&P 500 mutual fund or an ETF is probably the best. Buy and hold. Keep adding to it every month. If you do that over time, historically, that will most likely put you ahead of many professional money managers, which is not a bad thing. So, diversification, it really depends on you and your desire for high returns and tolerance for risk. Because if you invest in the market, you'll have better days than others. You'll have bad days. That's just the way it is. And I always point to Druckenmiller, and he lost $600 million in a few months on one trade. It happens. That's one thing I've never done, is lost $600 million on a trade. Does that make me better than Druckenmiller? Let's finish that thought. I have never made $20 billion on a trade either. So anyway, hope that helps. Anybody have any questions so far? Got another question on real estate. Is real estate a good investment now? And honestly, my thoughts are probably not right now. I look at things like there are a record number of houses for sale right now and more being added. We just hit the number of foreclosures this past month. We just equaled the same number as we had in 2007. Now, there are more houses out there, but still, there's a lot of bad stuff in the works. FHA alone, FHA has a program where for borrowers in the FHA program, if they miss payments, well, for the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, basically since COVID, actually, the FHA has stepped in and made those back payments. We talked about this or alluded to this a couple of weeks ago. Well, looking up, up some information on that, FHA just this past month made payments on over 200,000 missed mortgage payments. 200,000 missed payments from approximately 35,000 borrowers. So you've got 35,000 people that have missed more than one payment, 5, 6, 7 payments. FHA has stepped in and made the payments. Many of those have missed payments for years, and the FHA is still making those payments. No foreclosures. That number, the number of payments, is up 4,000 from February. Now, this is called a loan modification program. And we talked about the FHA takes that money that they pay on behalf of a borrower and adds it to their loan amount, to their principal amount. So, somebody has a $250,000 mortgage, can't make payments on it for, 10 months, payments, let's say $2,000 a month. Well, now FHA steps in and makes that $20,000 payment for them and adds that $20,000 to the loan amount. So now they owe $270,000. So their payment goes up. They couldn't make the previous payment, and now they're not able to make that payment. So another 5-10 months goes by, they can't make a payment. FHA steps in again, makes another payment. This time it's $25,000. Adds it to the principal. Now, instead of a $250,000 loan, they've got a $300,000 loan. Do you see what I'm talking about? That's been going on for years. It does several things. One, it defrauds the taxpayers because these people will never be able to pay back their loan, not unless they get a job paying twice as much. Most of them can't find a job, full-time job. So there is literally no chance that this money will be recovered. Secondly, it keeps home prices up because these homes aren't being foreclosed and they're not going on the market. People are still living in them, just not making payments. They're living payment free for years. Wouldn't that be nice? You take out a home mortgage, you never make payments, and you get to live in it for years for free. Now, I understand there are some individuals, families that are in difficult straits. But the practical reality is this causes a lot more pain for a lot more people. There is no good solution that benefits everybody. Well, there are, just looking at the data over the past 2 years, about 70% of the loans in the FHA category are delinquent. 55% seriously delinquent, up to 160,000 loans. Now, just imagine what's going to happen to home prices when 160,000 homes are dumped on the market all at the same time, rather than an orderly liquidation and process down through the years, because this program is going to be terminated. It just can't continue. FHA just stated that the program will be terminated this coming October. They're giving people some advance notice, some heads up, but they understand this is a losing program that ultimately does more harm than good. So they're terminating it. But it's not going to be pretty when all these homes are starting to be processed through foreclosures. It will help the taxpayers. It will help potential home buyers because housing prices are going to continue to go down. It will obviously will hurt the people in these homes who can't live for free anymore. But it very likely, my opinion, will cause a housing issue. A win for prospective homeowners, who had to face the government keeping home prices artificially high. And when it happens, trust me, you can expect Wall Street to be shocked, absolutely shocked by the defaults. Wall Street's shocked when they're the ones that I'll be paying the closest attention to this kind of mess. And speaking of which, Coachella was just, it's going on or is going on. Is it still going on? But I saw a blurb on the prices for Coachella. Tickets for an individual were like $700. VIPs were like $1,500. Food costs per day are $150 per day. I mean, a lemonade. Somebody said a lemonade was $17. And you think, well, must be nice to be wealthy. And then I saw where 70% of the tickets sold were sold on a buy now, pay later scheme. So you didn't even have to have money to go. You could go ahead and get a ticket, buy the ticket now and pay for it later. That's another thing Wall Street is going to be shocked, because this buy now, pay later is a growing trend in the country. I'm seeing it more and more. And you can expect Wall Street to be just appropriately shocked when the buy now, pay later defaults start coming in. No one would see that coming from a mile away. Credit card debt has soared. Now, instead of putting it on credit cards, they just get a separate little account, buy now, pay later. The retailers still make a sale, so all is well. All is well. No one sees any problem with that. No one sees that coming. So write that down. A few other interesting things happening in the world. Anyway, that was the specific questions I had. Do any of y'all have any questions? Any comments? Anything I said that doesn't make sense? So feel free to throw it out. If you are on YouTube or X, your questions should show up in my stream. If you're on Rumble, hate to ask this, but if you could go to X or YouTube to type in any questions you may have, because Rumble doesn't feed to StreamYard, which is our host. We do the broadcast through a service called StreamYard, and then that connects to the 3 different YouTube, X, Rumble, and does all simultaneously. But for some reason, Rumble doesn't feed the questions through. So if you have any questions, let me know. Something else I saw that was, I thought, terribly significant, terribly interesting, that gets little or no press, and that is Japan's 30-year rate on their bond hit 2.85%. Now, that sounds ridiculously low to us, but that's the highest in 20 years for Japan. And keep in mind, Japan's government has double or more than double the debt our government has, which our government debt is stupid high. Japan is kind of a unique situation, but nonetheless, they have double the debt. So if interest rates rise in Japan, it greatly increases the interest cost to the Japanese government. Think about if interest goes from 1% to 1.5%, you think, well, that's only 0.5% increase. That's not all that much. But from 1 to 1.5%, that increases their interest costs by 50%. That's the problem. When interest rates are real low, an increase of 25 or 50 basis points ends up being a huge amount of cash. So, rates up to 2.85%, the highest in 20, 22 years, somewhere around there. Japan also has some, the reason they're doing this is because Japan is experiencing rising inflation. And so they've got to hike rates to try to tamp down some of the inflation. Japan has a unique situation in that their population is shrinking, which you think normally would be deflationary. Fewer people buying fewer goods. Well, these people are making much more money. Wealth has greatly improved in Japan. So you've got fewer people, but they're spending more money. As they get older, they're also producing fewer goods and having to import more. So more money chasing fewer goods. That's inflation. Now, this hike, the reason I mentioned this hike and a little background on Japan, this has global effects that no one, again, is paying attention to. Investment markets in the U.S. have become terribly narcissistic. They're solely focused on just a few things that impact them directly and immediately. So anything right in front of their face. If it's not in front of their face, they can't see it. They're not even looking at it, or a lot of them aren't. Well, the global effects of the interest rate hike that nobody's paying attention to. Japan is the largest holder of U.S. Treasuries. Obviously, a key player in the global carry trade. And you remember last August when the yen carry trade collapsed? There's an opportunity to exploit a price differential or a yield differential sometimes in currency markets or in bond markets. You can borrow cheap, use it to buy a higher yielding asset, Cliff Notes version. So you capture that spread, and it's kind of like free money. So Japan is the largest holder of treasuries. Well, rising yields in Japan force their institutions to repatriate capital back to Japan. Because, in other words, they're having to sell U.S. treasuries because the prices are falling on the bonds in their portfolio. They're Japanese government bonds. Yields go up, teeter-totter. Yields go up, prices go down. Well, these Japanese bonds are being used as collateral on loans. And so the value of the collateral on that loan is dropping. Well, the banks who made the loan initially are saying, hey, you don't have the same collateral. You need to contribute more cash, increase your collateral. It's kind of like a margin call. And so these, Japanese investors are getting margin calls, or corporations who manage their risk using something called value at risk. I think it's a stupid idea, but I won't go into it tonight. But it's a statistical process used to measure and quantify risk. Well, as the collateral drops, it starts sending off warning signals in this VAR analysis. So corporations have to increase their cash. How do you do that? You sell U.S. Treasuries. How do the banks fund margin calls? They sell U.S. Treasuries. Banks have to maintain a certain level of capital. If the value of their government bonds falls, they could breach those capital limits, regulatory limits. How do they get above the limit? Well, they have to add more cash. So they have to sell Treasury bonds. So the bottom line point is you've got all these financial institutions that in some way or another are getting hammered by the drop in the value of their bonds. That will force them to sell their most liquid asset, which is U.S. Treasury bonds. Teeter-totter. Selling bonds, supply and demand. As price goes down, yield goes up. So it'll increase U.S. yields and increase volatility in the bond market, which almost always bleeds over to the stock market. Volatility, dropping price. And it'll do that to an extent most people don't imagine or think about. Now, also keep in mind, there's a lot of financial institutions in the U.S. with leveraged positions where bonds, Treasury bonds, are collateral. So think about it. As Japan is selling more and more bonds, Treasury bonds, the price on U.S. Treasuries fall. So for those U.S. financial institutions that use Treasuries as their collateral, what do you think's going to happen? As the value of their collateral falls, they're going to get margin calls. Sounds like just a damn fun time, doesn't it? This will put a huge squeeze on liquidity, on cash, which greases the wheels of the economy. It will force a ton of sales on all sorts of leveraged assets to reduce or close out the position. To kind of cliff note it or make it a little bit more simple, hopefully a little more clear, think of it as like a house and a mortgage. You take out money, but you put your house up as collateral. And the bank accepts that because the house has a certain value compared to the loan. It's a greater value than the loan. Well, what if housing prices just collapsed? The value of your collateral fell. And it starts falling to a level getting closer and closer to that loan value. Well, the bank is concerned about the safety of its loan and you having insufficient collateral to pay off the loan in a worst case scenario. So this puts the bank at a huge risk of you defaulting. And so the bank's going to demand more collateral. If you don't have it, you have to sell off the house to pay the loan. Now, just imagine what would happen to home prices if 20, 30% of the homes in your neighborhood all went up for sale at the same time. And if this was happening nationally as well. Prices will just tank. So on any asset that has a leveraged position, which would include stocks, commodities, futures, bonds, derivatives, prices will crash. So in other words, we have lived in a world of gross excess and ignoring risk for 15 years. And it has a price. We are going to pay the piper sooner or later. This kind of collapse would necessitate some sort of extensive foreign exchange operation, coordinated interventions. Japan can't afford a collapsing yen. Neither of us can afford collapsing financial markets. Now, it gets even prettier when you think that, you've got this monetary dysfunction and you combine that with an ongoing recession. That really is what caused the 2008 collapse. We're looking right now at a deflationary environment in this country. Japan's been in one, China's in one. That's when things really start to break. And I mean, you can look at things like the copper to gold ratio. I pulled this up. Let's see if I can get it up. All right. Copper to gold ratio. You can see what happened to the ratio. Now, copper to gold. If you think about it, it kind of makes intuitive sense. Copper is a growth metal. When people are building homes, businesses, whatever, more electricity, more copper tubing, copper's in great demand when an economy is expanding. Gold is in high demand when people are panicking. So you've got a growth metal versus a panic metal, if that makes sense. So that ratio of the two is kind of important in terms of giving you an idea of, how things are headed. You see what happened during the subprime crisis. The ratio at 2008 just collapsed, copper to gold. Well, it's because copper prices fell, gold prices soared. Same thing's happening now. And you can tell it's been kind of in that trend since the COVID stimulus ended. Now, it was trending down, before COVID knocked it down pretty quick. And then the stimulus bumped it up pretty quick. People had tons of money that they could invest. So they started dumping gold. Buying houses. Remember, that's when the housing prices just blew up. Well, building all those houses and everything, copper goes up. Since then, it has been generally consistently trending down and is, getting down to modestly precarious levels. That's not a good sign. You want to keep an eye on that ratio. So that's a real concern to me as far as what's going on with, Japan. China is going to be an even more extended story. Probably spend a good bit of time on that Saturday. These things don't immediately affect your life tomorrow, but they will greatly impact your life and future for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's why it's important that you have some understanding. Melissa, apparently Trader Joe's shopping bags are a fashion symbol in Japan. Speaking of fashion, have you seen some of the Chinese factories advertising now that they're the ones actually making all the designer label pants, handbags, purses, shoes, whatever, and they're offering to sell direct? Like, is it Prada, whatever? Obviously, I'm a fashion queen, but those purses go for, I don't know, $800 a purse, $1,000 a purse, and they're offering to sell them for $25. What are the leggings? Lululemon something? I saw a brief ad for them. Apparently, Lulu charges $130 a pair. They're offering to sell them for $5. Same plant where they're manufactured, they just won't have the little label sewn in. Yeah, one, they're exposing the massive margins that these designer items have. They're not made in Italy. They're not made in France. They're made in China. And secondly, if I was Prada or Lulu, I'd be mad as hell. I'd be damned if I'd send that, have them manufacture anything else. So are they cutting their own throats? I don't know. But if you're a consumer and you need some Lulu stretch pants, it's probably a good time to order a few pair. I don't know. This is just a fascinating world right now. Lot of balls up in the air. I hope y'all are enjoying the show. The world economy kind of show. All the marionettes and everybody trying to pull the strings, and some of those people who had power over the strings are losing their power, and it's not going over well. Like I have said, there will be chaos, there will be pain. I think we'll end up being far better off for it, but there's risk. There is risk, and I don't make any bones about it. So does that make sense? Feel free to tell me, no, I am utterly lost. You speak babble. And I'm not trying to be a doomsdayer. There are significant risk out there. There are significant downside potential situations. There's some good going on as well. While I'm convinced the good will be beneficial in the long run, the big question is how quickly can the good overcome the bad? There's going to be bad, and it'll be hitting over the next year. What can be done to forestall, to ease the bad? If dumping and the yen starts collapsing, like I say, you could see some, intervention from the various governments, central banks, Bank of Japan, Federal Reserve. That's kind of what got us in this mess. But if they temper it, do it for a short term just to try to help milk through the worst of the crisis, and then, let the market do what it does, that's probably the best case scenario, my opinion, in terms of speeding the recovery and giving it a firm foundation to rest on for the next 10 years, 15 years. So we'll see. But anybody have any questions? Or is everybody going out and ordering some Lulu pants? Anybody you need gifts for? That's funny. So if my intuition feelings are correct, that probably doesn't bode well for the markets, most of the markets short term. And that may, you may even see Bitcoin taking a hit. Gold probably is a pretty decent bet. Not making any predictions, not offering investment advice, just kind of musing out loud. Silver, maybe to a lesser degree. Silver just hadn't gotten the publicity gold has. It hasn't done bad, but gold is the one that's in demand, and that very possibly will only increase if things really start to turn south or look like they will. So, also somebody mentioned, is this a good time to buy NVIDIA? That was, I have mentioned before, I have some concerns about their bookkeeping and whether or not they've been, perfectly upfront about some of their bookkeeping, um, some auditor issues, etc. Well, tonight was looking there. They dropped 6 or 7% after hours trading because they announced a $5.5 billion write-off related to the loss of business in China. The government the other day came out and said you cannot export chips to China. Remember, China came out with this AI. I don't think was it DeepSeek, and it was actually made out of, I want to say obsolete NVIDIA chips. I mean, chips they manufactured 4 or 5 years ago, and this technology improves rapidly. They still were good chips, but they just strung a bunch of them together basically and made this modestly impressive AI system. So selling of those chips to China has now been prohibited. So NVIDIA took a $5.5 billion write-off today. Stock's down 7%. Most semi firms also are getting slammed. When I last looked, NASDAQ futures were down over 200 points tonight. So there's still a lot of, there's a lot of fun ahead. Don't know exactly how much, don't know exactly how long, but it's just something you need to keep in mind and be observant. So, any other questions? That is kind of all I have. I guess I ought to start preparing well, it's kind of hard on Tuesdays. I get out of school late and try to run home and put something together. I usually rely on E-Train's witty conversation to consume some of the time, and she usually throws out questions, sometimes from places I'm not familiar with, but nonetheless. So am missing her a little bit. She's an important piece of the puzzle here, and hopefully she can get her damn internet fixed soon to where she can have a reliable connection. It has been a great source of irritation. Carson, sun visor clip replaced. Congratulations, man. That's a good evening. That's a good night. If it's any consolation, I just had my oil changed the other day too. So I'm feeling all sporty now. I don't need another oil change for months. Actually thinking of taking a pretty long drive this summer. So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, I may just kind of head out west and do some camping as I go along and just check out some rare places, abandoned places, old cemeteries, beautiful mountains, hiking trails, waterfalls, that kind of thing. And but put some miles on the old truck. So glad you made some progress, Carson. Anybody else have anything they want to throw in? I did notice, one other thing, China's credit got downgraded yesterday by Fitch. Fitch cut them to A from A+. Now the highest is AAA. Well, Fitch is single A. There's Fitch. Let's see, Fitch ratings. Dun-dun-dun. That's not what I wanted. You think I would know Fitch? Yeah, Fitch uses AAA. So they downgraded them from single A to just A. They cut it, they said, on two things: debt risk and trade tensions. I've talked about China has a ton of debt that they are already struggling to repay. And now they're shutting down factories. Their ports are turning into ghost towns. Inventory is building up on the ports. Their flow of cash is drying up rapidly. So if they've already got debt in prosperous times that they can't repay, they've already got government employees that aren't being paid, what does that bode for their future? I don't know how the hell they're still rated A, honestly. I don't know how S&P still has them rated A+. And they're kind of cutting their own throat in terms of future business, because I don't think, a lot of companies that have dealt with them, from fashion designers, they're not going to do business with them anymore because China's screwing them over. Doesn't matter whether they're American, French, English, Italian, whatever. They're getting screwed over. Just imagine if you were a, provider of, goods, and you contracted out some of the manufacturing to somebody else, and they took your secrets, your product you designed, built, whatever, set the specs for, and then started selling it, undercutting your price. Would you want to continue business with those people? No. So, to me, it's just not looking pretty for China. I just don't see much of a future there. That and their demographics is starting to implode on them. Anyway, it will be interesting to watch over the next literally year or two. It'll be relatively quick. I know some people think, next month is quick, but actually, a year or two is actually quick for an economic collapse. So, well, y'all, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. That's really all I've got offhand. Sorry about the confusion getting things started. Appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Hope to see you again Saturday night, 7. If you've got any questions, any feedback, suggestions on how to improve the program other than get Ellen's internet fixed, which we're working on, let me know, moffatonmoney@gmail.com, or DM me on X. If you will, please hit the like button before you go. Kind of helps us with our outreach, and I'll look forward to seeing y'all again. To members of the family, thank you so much. Love you guys, and hope y'all have a great rest of the week. Our time is up. We thank you for yours. Good night, y'all.